All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today for our Hook Talent EDU Neurodiversity Recruiting Best Practices. We're so excited to co-host this great workshop with our Longhorn Ties program. All right. And I'll just keep letting folks in as they arrive. So we'll get started here. So first of all, we are going to I'm Megan Fortson. I'm the Assistant Director of Employer Engagement with Texas Career Engagement. And UT Austin has over 16, we have 16 career centers, and we're all devoted to serve student populations. In Texas Career Engagement, we serve all students and alumni. And we do this with our awesome campus partners and also all of our career centers. And we created this Hook Talent EDU just to ensure that employers have all the information to have success recruiting at UT campus-wide. So, knowing about all the hidden talent, all the different skills and majors, where those live, helping you connect to all of our campus partners. And we've covered topics such as building internships programs, how to supervise interns, diversity recruiting. And, this has been a great opportunity to educate employers on the hidden talent, but also just to have this open line of communication during this, year plus that we've had in recruiting during COVID. And so we're just so happy to be here today. Longhorn Ties is a UT initiative to increase support and awareness for individuals who identify with being on the autism spectrum. And we're also excited to have Dell here with us today to share information about their recruiting best practices and neurodiversity recruiting at Dell. So we'll also leave plenty of time for Q&A at the end. And then we want to hear from you. If you have best practices that you would love to share, we would love to hear that as well. So we're excited to just get started. So first I'll do a fireside chat with Longhorn Ties. So we're here today with Ashley Richardson. She's our Autism Spectrum Education Outreach Administrator. And then also Catherine Suture, she's our programming coordinator with Longhorn Ties. So thank y'all so much for being here. We're just gonna have a conversation and we look forward to learning about your students from you.
Yes, thanks for having us. And conversations are best. We like the conversational flow.
That's awesome. Well, good. So first, we just wanna ask you, can you please define neurodiversity for everyone here today?
Yes, and what we are actually going to do is share our screen real quick. And that's going to we have a great slide that talks about neurodiversity. And first, I do want to start, as Megan said, my name is Ashley, and I am the Autism Spectrum Education Outreach Administrator and the Program Administrator for Longhorn Ties. And I'll let Catherine go ahead and introduce herself real quick.
Hi, everybody. Happy to be here. My name's Catherine, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Longhorn Ties Programming Coordinator, working with our awesome students with Ashley.
Yeah. So Longhorn Ties, we have the great opportunity to provide individualized support services to students who identify as being on the spectrum or neurodiverse. So if we're looking at what is neurodiversity, the term neurodiversity refers to basic variation in human brain regarding sociability, learning, attention, mood, and other mental functions. So it really describes the differences between the abilities in someone's neurological profile. So some common diagnoses that are included under this umbrella, you will see autism, ADHD, learning disabilities, dyslexia, and even Tourette syndrome. I've heard some clinicians put PTSD under that neurodiversity umbrella. And so that's, but the diagnoses listed are probably the most common ones out there. Catherine?
Yeah, so neurodiversity goes beyond just diagnoses too. So the best way I can put it is that neurodiversity encompasses different ways that our brains work. Our brains are all wired differently. And the neurodiversity paradigm recognizes that no one type of way that a brain is made is best. Socially, neurotypical brains are in the majority, and our society is constructed to benefit a neurotypical brain. And so somebody who's neurodivergent or identifies as neurodivergent may face barriers or challenges But that's more of a social construction and not a reflection of their brain being worse. It's just different. So the neurodiversity movement really came about to celebrate these differences, just like all parts of the diversity movement. You know, when we think about race, gender, ethnicity, neurodiversity is just another part of that. So celebrating and uplifting our neurodivergent friends, family, peers, employers.
Awesome. Thank you all so much. That really helps everyone and just sets the stage for our conversation.
Yeah.
So do you see, and our next question is, do you see any patterns regarding major or career interests of students that use your services?
Well, so you may have heard of the same. You've met one person with autism, you met one person with autism. And I want to preference this. You might hear us go and use first person language, excuse me. Here, I'm going to go back a screen here. Oopsie. There we go. Person first language or identity first language. Just so you're aware, a person first puts the person before the disability, like a student with autism. And that's what many of us are taught. And identity first reflects disability as part of identity, so autistic student. So you're just going to hear us probably go back and forth between those two, but identity first is generally what's preferred by the community. But in regards to majors, the stereotypical majors that you may think of, STEM, so our science, our math, our electrical engineering, that is I would say a myth. A lot of our students don't fall underneath that category. We have students pretty much in every major. We do have a lot of students that fall under communications. So we have a lot of radio, television, and film majors, a lot of creatives. Catherine, we do have a few CNS majors, College of Natural Science, that are interested in mathematics. And then even some government majors.
Yeah, I think building on that, we were saying earlier this semester, I think the only school where we didn't have a student represented was the business school. And then of course we met a student from the business school pretty soon after that. So I think across UT, we have students in every major you could think of: sustainability, social work, computer science. So it's really cool to see the diversity of employers here, because our students definitely have a diversity of career interests.
Yeah, definitely.
That is so awesome. And that's why we really want to talk about that question, because I've had other meetings with Services for Students with Disabilities, our partner too. And, we've talked about, hey, we see a lot of disability inclusive initiatives and programs and accommodations within technology, and just working together to expand that to all industries and employers, that awareness. So that's awesome. So then also, what challenges and advantages do you see students having with their career exploration, their job search, or recruiting that you talk about?
Well, I first want to say that, although Catherine and I are both clinicians and we work with our students and we work with this in this field for a very long time, we're not the experts. Our students are the experts. And it's really important that you all had an opportunity to hear from neurodivergent students and kind of go over hear from their challenges. So we asked a few students kind of some of their challenges. And so we'll let you hear their challenges and then also kind of talk about things that we have seen as practitioners in the field. So some of the challenges that our students have mentioned, first, when it comes to the career exploration, it's not straightforward all the time. And our students would like to know kind of just the first steps. What do they need to do first? Whether that is, going to Handshake, setting up their profile, having an outline of what to expect. One student I met this week says, yes, I met with this person, but I really don't know where to go, what to do next. I have my resume, but I don't know if it's right, or I don't know specific things I need to include. So always helpful, to have kind of more detailed information, but that's something our students do struggle with. One of our students says, just when it comes to the interviewing process and searching for interns, like understanding The student says, understanding things like a neurodiverse student may not make eye contact, may stim or use other coping mechanisms, and may ask to have questions repeated due to anxiety levels being very important or being very high. And so this student was referencing feeling anxious a lot of the times with the whole process and having to ask lots of questions, but feeling uncomfortable, thinking that the employer is uncomfortable or our staff is uncomfortable because they're asking so many questions. Catherine, do you have some from another student?
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about that too, what you said with the interview process and what we hear from some students about the interview process being stressful for anybody applying for a job, right? But especially for autistic students or neurodivergent students, these kind of unspoken social norms or expectations going into a new setting, like an interview, can be really anxiety producing. And so kind of setting up expectations for the interview at the front can help with that. And even providing more information. This is what the student I chatted with talked about, providing kind of explicit information about company culture, what the workplace is actually like, because our students, right, are also trying to glean if an employment setting could be a good fit for them, and understanding what that would look like. So I thought this was such a good idea. The student I was talking to earlier suggested having like photos of a workspace or like a virtual tour, either attached with the job description. So a student could maybe rule out, yes, this would be a good fit, or no, I don't, or, you know, I think this would not be the best for me. Or during the interview process, giving strong descriptions of what workplace culture is and really naming that culture. You know, I think a lot of us have probably experienced in an interview a place saying, oh, we have a great workplace culture, but like, what does that actually mean? Do people, is it a very chatty office? Do people have separate spaces? Things like that. Just being really specific and explicit about what that workplace culture is. And even including testimonials, like this student said, it'd be really helpful to see a quote or a testimonial from an employee. You know, even better if it could be from a neurodivergent employee to show that the workplace is inclusive and accepting. And her other idea, these were so creative, all of them. She suggested like having office hours or shadow opportunities for an internship or for a potential employee to kind of just hang out in the office or the workspace for a day or for an hour and observe and really get a vibe for what the work looks like, what the day-to-day is like. So I think just providing information about what somebody's routine might look like, or what their day-to-day would be really helpful for our students.
I think the visuals, Catherine, you mentioned too, because Megan asked, like, what are some of the challenges our students are seeing with just the whole process and not having, we talked about kind of the step-by-step process, but how that student mentioned having like kind of a video, a day in the life of what it's like in this position. So our students can have an idea, or even kind of what it's like with the interview process. One of our students mentioned that I talked to, that sometimes a student may disclose and sometimes they may not disclose, but you know, the student was like, if I disclose, you know, just being patient with me through the interview process. The topic of disclosure is so huge, and students do not have, don't have to disclose if they do not want to, but just to keep in mind that our students are probably battling that thought in the back of their head. Should I say something? Am I looking them in the eyes? Did I say something too long? Am I making sense? Because they're trying to make sure that they are following those quote unquote social norms that that don't just come natural to them. Or they're trying to mask certain things, and masking is really common for our students, and we all mask in one way or the other, but it's kind of hiding some of our characteristics to identify as more neurotypical. And so some of our students may be constantly masking during that interview process, where they aren't really able to show who they truly are. So when, you know, the student mentioned kind of being patient, I thought that was really great of them. But with, you know, of course, we have to start with just finding the jobs. I think a lot of our students have difficulties with just kind of locating things that they might be interested in. And something that also could help is the job descriptions.
I think your point, Ashley, about masking and about being patient is so important. And, you know, we did a little bit of myth busting with the majors and career interests of our students. And I think it's important to do a little bit of myth busting about autism and who's autistic. Because like Ashley said, somebody may or may not disclose. And, you know, autism doesn't just look like one type of person. You know, we have within Longhorn Ties, like half of our students are trans or non-binary. We have students from different countries. We have Latinx students. We have Black students. You know, it's really not who you might see portrayed in the media all the time. So I think that's important to keep in mind, even if someone doesn't disclose, they may still be neurodivergent and deserving of some of these same graces and patience. Yeah.
And those characteristics manifest differently among everyone. You know, when we're doing these trainings and having these discussions, it's, you know, remembering that we're all different. We all handle stress differently. And, you know, that myth of, you know, this is what a male identifying person on the spectrum, this is how they act. That is not going to be true for the next person that you may see. So just kind of keeping that in mind as well.
Yeah. And I think for an employer, you know, maybe even more important than knowing explicitly if somebody is or isn't on the spectrum would be what helps you perform your best work. You know, what have past supervisors or professors done that have helped you succeed? And those, you know, knowledge of those type of supports can inform how they might fit into a workplace.
This is such amazing insight and advice. And we all loved how you said, you know, the students are the experts. So thank you for, you know, chatting with them and getting some input from them, to some testimonials. And also something that I'm hearing too is the importance of, with the interview process, you know, not only focusing on the behavioral social skills being showcased, but allowing them to showcase their actual hard skills, the skills related to the task and the job. And so finding ways in interviews to incorporate that, that's so awesome. And then, so we talked about some challenges. What are some advantages you see these students having, and even, you know, the benefits of neurodiversity in the workplace?
Yeah. Well, one of the big benefits of neurodiversity is you're promoting diversity and inclusion in the workspace. And you are really making that extra step to make your environment more inclusive to varying identities and varying learning styles. I think another great benefit is just with, you may have heard that some autistic students struggle with social communication challenges. Well, I like to flip, you know, some of the challenges on its head and look at those strengths. And some individuals have great direct communication style, and they don't beat around the bush. And in certain environments, we need that because we need to get things done. And so having that direct communication style is really helpful. And also just strengths with protocol and procedures. If you let them, you know, they are really great when it comes to routine and organization. And so having those protocol and procedures laid out, a neurodivergent student may do really great at just following those. Catherine, you want to expand on some? I don't want to take all of them.
Yeah, for sure. And we even have a strength slide we can kind of have in the background while we're talking about some of these in relation to work specifically. But a lot of autistic people or autistic students have like a very special interest or something they're really passionate about. And when that bleeds into work, they can have the capacity to develop such strong content expertise and really become experts in their fields and leaders in their fields. And our students also bring, just like Ashley said, a benefit of neurodiversity in the workplace is the same benefit of diversity in the workplace, right? They can bring in unique thought processes, novel approaches that maybe haven't been in that workplace before. Along with that goes a lot of creativity. All of these here, you know, I can think of how they could apply to so many different fields. Well,
and the loyalty, the integrity. So, you know, if we're all paying attention to the news, and a lot of individuals are becoming entrepreneurs and leaving the workplace to do certain things. Well, a lot of neurodivergent students, that strength of integrity, honesty, and loyalty, they will demonstrate a strong sense of loyalty to the workplace and to their employer who they're working for, wanting to make an impact and make a difference and grow and learn within that environment. So I think that is really helpful when you are looking at recruiting, because a lot of times you're like, oh, I need this entry level, but sometimes our students want to grow and will stay with that company to see all the options that are available if it's a right fit.
Mm-hmm.
I love this. Thank you so much for this great skills slide. This is just such wonderful information for everyone. And so what are some good, great accommodations, some accommodation recruiting best practices that you'd like to share with employers today? So just even thinking about the job application, interviewing, onboarding, and retention of employees.
Well, first, I would say with the recruiting, just first the announcement, the job posting, what that is, using graphics, providing examples of tasks that are completed, not always focusing on those majors, because what happens for a lot of our students is they'll see a major listed, but they don't apply, even if they have experience in, they may have a minor or did a certificate or have tons of work experience. Some of our students become very fixated on certain requirements listed, and if they don't fit that box, they won't even look at it, or they think that they're not experienced enough for that position. So I would say being creative with that posting, including graphics, maybe not listing the majors or listing the majors instead, but we're open to, additional experience and things of that nature. I think that could really be helpful. When it comes to the interviewing, a student mentioned, and this is funny, but the student said, don't start off by asking the interviewee about themselves first. Instead, allow the interviewer to share information about the position. And this student, I think in particular, was saying sometimes I come into the interview super nervous, and if that's the first question, I don't know what to say. And so by them telling me about the company and the position, it allows me time to kind of catch my thoughts together and figure out, a response to who I am. And so I thought that was really interesting. But also when it comes to the interview process, understanding that Megan mentioned looking at those technical skills. Some of our students don't have great strengths with those due to social communication challenges they may have. So look at other ways you can gauge their skill set just outside of that 5-minute interview. Are they able to submit, whether that is a writing sample, or is that kind of a video of something they've done, or their portfolio? Are they able to show kind of their skill set in another manner that's outside of just a one-on-one interview? Catherine?
Yeah, I can think of a few, and I think, again, it's so individual that asking those questions, like what supports would you find helpful, or what would let you do your best work, can really show what accommodations throughout this process are needed for an individual. But that being said, to generalize, I think that, like Ashley said, starting out interviews with kind of agenda setting, like I'll tell you a little bit about us, then I'm going to ask you some questions, and we'll have time for this at the end. Mm-hmm. I think that can be really helpful. And I think there are even just signals of things that can show a neurodivergent prospective employee that this is an inclusive place, right? Like having fidgets available nearby for an interview, or offering, hey, would you prefer to have natural light or cut the fluorescent lights on? Even modeling, like maybe I'll have something that I'm messing with in my hands during the interview, and that's okay here. I think those can send really powerful messages to our students. And then the other thing, I think that COVID showed a lot of us that many jobs can be performed remotely. And I think a lot of those jobs are starting to go back fully in person. And I think even thinking through, is this a job that could continue to be done remotely? Could I give this person the option to do it in person or virtually based on their preferences and their needs? You know, I'd say we have a split between our students of if they definitely want to be in person or definitely want to be virtual. But that is an accommodation. And, you know, most employers have shown that it is possible to do. So just keeping that kind of door open, I think could be helpful as well.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to share, Catherine and I both attended a presentation by a faculty member within the College of Education this past week, and they were talking about disability in the workplace. And one thing this professor mentioned is when we're thinking about accommodations, we always think about accommodations for the quote unquote person that is disabled for some reason. And she gave an example of a colleague she was speaking to. They were in, she said they were in a Zoom meeting, and they didn't know that the person that they were speaking with was blind until it started becoming darker, and they didn't need to turn on the lights because it wasn't needed for them. But she said, but for myself, light is an accommodation. I need light when I am doing a presentation. And so just keeping that in mind, in a sense that all of these accommodations that you may think of, they're not just for one population. These accommodations could be for everyone and could be helping everyone with varying needs. And so when she pointed that out, I never looked at it from that perspective. And so I thought it was really helpful and really helpful for employers.
I love that. And it reminds me of your advice with the question about what do you need to do your best work? And I think a lot of times in interviews we ask, what kind of management style do you prefer? Well, then in addition to that, what kind of communication, what kind of resources in your question, what helps you do your best work goes for everyone? That's such a great question.
And provide examples. When you said what kind of management style, I can hear a student saying, well, what are the types? Understanding, okay, well, this is an example of a management type. Do you like it when I check in with you via email? Do you like it when someone kind of gives you a to-do list? Examples are really helpful.
And that's so true, because students, it's their first time in the workforce, right? So you're like, I don't know, tell me what kind of managers I might have. That's great. And then I also love, and it just, resonates with everything that we're about with Texas Career Engagement, is the piece about, recruiting skills versus major, because majors are just like this box, and students' skills live all across campus. Not just business students have finance skills. There's business minors, there's economic students, mathematics, So I think that's, that's something that we share as a best practice with employers. And it's, and also we say your job description, you can clearly stay open to all majors. We train, just calling those things out, because students are literal. They're very like,
and connect with resources on campus. So Texas, I've been using acronyms, so I'm trying to get out
Texas
of
Career Engagement.
I just keep saying TCE, and our students are understanding it by now, but they're a resource and they can connect with other resources on campus. So if you're specifically looking at something neurodiverse, reach out to our team, or reach out through Megan, and she'll reach out to our team just for, tips or how to really get this population in ways that you can help. Because connecting yourself with someone on campus is super helpful. And y'all are already doing that by being here today.
Definitely. And what we do when I get, I'll get neurodiversity internships. And depending on, the skills they're targeting, I'll email Ashley's team, Ashley and Catherine, and then I'll also in career centers. So that's what I'll do. I can help y'all really target career centers with skills, and of course, Ashley and Catherine too. And then we have a question here in the chat, and it says, are there best practices on how to incorporate proactively asking about accommodation needs in the hiring process? In other words, looking for ways we can communicate with a diverse group of applicants in a standard way that allows everyone to share their needs. I mean, definitely, I feel like that can be part of just the question you add to your recruiting process in the interview or the onboarding, just always having that question available for all candidates.
Yeah, and I think too, that word accommodation, sometimes this came up a little bit in the talk Ashley mentioned earlier, accommodation kind of brings up this idea of like my legal requirement, what I have to do to make a workplace accessible or to accommodate somebody. But really, accommodations don't have to be that. They can be so much more. There's not a limit on how much you can accommodate somebody. So even those more general questions like, what really helps you do your best work, or what, giving examples. So like, maybe like, I personally love to have a lamp by my office instead of the fluorescent lights. Like, is there anything that's really important for you? I think that might get information from all applicants, even if they've never thought about an accommodation in that sense of the word before.
And if you're thinking about having like I need to put this on my application or send it via email, and if you're just looking at a one-liner, you can state that, but give examples of what it could look like and say, these are some examples, but our company is very open to meeting the needs of our prospective applicants. So, giving examples of, change of lighting, a list of kind of questions, or a visual representation of kind of a graphic of what a day of the life or what to expect for the interview, something of that nature. But I think giving examples could be really helpful.
I love that, because sometimes you don't know what you need. And you don't know like the options. So it's nice to see that laid out. So to close our conversation, do you have any other insight or advice you'd like to share with employers today?
I would first say, when you're looking at this population, you have to remember first, you're accessing a very unique, talent pipeline. We work with students every day, and I think students amaze us every day of the things they know, the things they do, the things they're capable of. And, by opening up to different diverse identities and population, you're really diversifying and normalizing different learning styles. Like, you're taking this one step and, showing in your work setting, we all think differently. There are different learning styles, and we are, accommodating, and we're really being active to make sure we're normalizing that this is the case and that we are bringing this into our work setting. So I think those are just two things I want you kind of to take away. Catherine?
Yeah, I think that's great. And I think even thinking about, I love to see this large group of employers that are interested in making their workplaces accommodating and accessible for neurodivergent people. And also remembering like neurodivergent coworkers, supervisors, like these are already in most of our workplaces. So everything that you're doing and could do would not just help prospective employees, but people who are already there.
Yeah. And listen to those people already on your work site. Like we said at the beginning, we aren't the experts because we don't identify. However, there already are going to be indie representing folks in your spaces. So talk to them about some things that would be helpful, some things that they would, would want change, because those are the individuals that are going to give you even the best recruiting advice when trying to talk to this population.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ashley and Catherine. This was just an amazing advice and insight for our employers. So now, if I can drive the screen, I'll share my screen again. And we would love for y'all to share those slides with us, and we'll also share them with the attendees. That'd be really great. And then, so I will share my slide. All right. And so now we're going to move on to our portion of Dell sharing best practices about their neurodiversity talent acquisition. And we are so happy to have Danielle Benedict here as a senior advisor of diversity and talent acquisition. Thank you, Danielle, for sharing your best practices.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you all for having me. It's so good to hear all of these best practices, actually, because they are very much in line with some of the things that I already planned on going over today. So again, I'm Danielle with Dell Technologies. It's been a long week. I've been with Dell for almost 2 years now. And I lead our diversity talent acquisition pillar for individuals with disabilities across North America. And one of the major focuses of my role is program managing our neurodiversity hiring program. It's also my favorite part of this role. So today I'll just give you a high-level overview of what Dell's neurodiversity program looks like, kind of the history to illustrate where we started and then where we are today. And through that, I'm hopeful that I'll just kind of weave in some best practices and some lessons learned along the way And then toward the end, I can go over some more concrete best practices, but like I said, a lot of them have already been mentioned today. So we'll just start with the history and the overview. We launched our program in 2018, and it really started out as a grassroots effort led by our True Ability employee resource group leaders. True Ability is an employee resource group focused on supporting individuals with disabilities. And so they kind of tapped our talent acquisition team on the shoulder and said, hey, can we develop a program that's focused on hiring neurodivergent talent? And with that, we pretty much hit the ground running. We started working to evaluate some local community partners that could support us with developing an alternative interview experience. And that alternative interview experience is really one of the major components or benefits of the program. And so I'll give you a little bit of perspective about what that looks like. And it's essentially an alternative interview for individuals because we recognize that the traditional interview doesn't always provide the best opportunity for someone to fully showcase their skills and potential. So we invite candidates to come in and interview with us over either a 2-week or a 1-week period. Sometimes we do it in just a couple of days. We have multiple pathways that we allow folks to go through that best fits with their schedule and their needs. But essentially what we provide is a series of professional development sessions that kind of break down some of those unspoken rules of the workplace so that we can not only prepare them for what to expect, but also give them at the same time a better perspective on what it's like to work for Dell. We incorporate alumni students to come and talk about their experience participating in the program. We also ERG members just to speak on a panel about life at Dell. And so that's one aspect of the alternative interview experience. And then another is really allowing the candidates to drive conversations with managers so that they can meet with them in a much less structured and lower anxiety provoking environment. And that gives them a chance to really talk about their skills in a way that they can describe and are comfortable with by like going through a portfolio or something. And so with that, we also give them the opportunity to work on a project that they would work on in their desired field. And so through that experience, managers and myself, the program team, get to really see the way that they would approach a problem, the way that they would solve the problem, and then the managers actually get to sit side by side with them and like look at the code that they're writing or ask them questions about the way that they would approach a different experience in the workplace. And so through that, managers get a really full perspective on what types of skills and strengths they can offer to that team. And then another component of the program is offering an ecosystem of supports to all of the folks that we hire on. So that support system looks a lot like having an external job coach that they can meet with from time to time, just to kind of talk through the way that they're assimilating into the workplace. If they have any challenges or concerns, then that's something they can work through with their job coach and their manager. And the job coach can just kind of act as a liaison or extra level of support for that individual and their manager. We also offer mentorship opportunities that really help the person get to know the Dell's culture, and they're there to kind of ask questions that maybe the job coach might not be able to answer because they're external to the company. And then similarly, we provide a number of other professional development courses and opportunities and some career mapping or planning for kind of giving them a sense of where they see their future going at Dell. So those are some of the main accommodations, and I use air quotes when I say accommodations because they're really just best practices that we weave into our hiring experience. So once we had all of that mapped out, we were ready to launch. And so we started very small, and then we decided to kind of grow in place over the years. So the first couple of years, we held that alternative interview experience in more of like a classroom style setting. And then by 2020, we were ready to take things to the next level because we obviously were faced with a lot of challenges from the pandemic. And we redesigned our program to be completely virtual or accessible remotely. And with that, we found a lot of really great advantages because we were able to recruit people from a national level, whereas before we were only recruiting folks that were closer to our hub locations, which were like in Massachusetts or Texas. And so we've been able to really expand our recruiting model and therefore bring in more talent. And with the opportunity to bring in more talent, we've also been able to engage different parts of the business because, again, we understand that there's a number of different skill sets that we see across this population, and we don't ever want to try and pigeonhole, if you will, someone into a specific role type. And while we see a lot of interest in the tech or like STEM fields, we also have a number of folks that have come into positions in sales or marketing or, finance and even in HR roles. And so we don't want to limit anyone to one specific role type or business unit. And over the years now, we've been able to tap into every single part of our business to hire folks through this program. So today, we're at a point where we're offering both internships, summer internships, and then full-time opportunities to people across the business. And we have a 100% retention rate to date, which is just fantastic and goes to show a lot of like what you were saying earlier, Ashley, about how loyal some of our candidates are and how once they are given the chance to come and perform, they really just outdo their peers, to be completely honest. And so with all of that being said, that's kind of a little bit of where we've come to date, but we still have a ways to go. You know, there's a lot of areas where we can still continue to grow. And our hope is that this will not always just be a program, but rather something that's really ingrained into the way that and it's a part of our DNA as a company. And so those are some of the best practices that we have woven into the program. But Megan, you tell me, would you like me to just kind of give a list of other best practices or maybe some lessons learned when it comes to actually shaping out a program like this?
Definitely, you know, and I love also how, you know, you spoke about the internships, because I think a lot of times when employers have disability inclusive programs, they're very focused on full-time hires. And I've heard, you know, like with our services for students with disabilities, the students sometimes have the hardest time finding the internships that are disability inclusive. So yes, I'd love just to, you can, you know, talk about some lessons learned maybe and how y'all pivoted throughout the years too. That sounds great.
Yeah, definitely. So one of the first lessons learned, and to any employer who's interested in launching a neurodiversity program, is that there's not one simple way of doing it. You know, I work with a number of different companies, you know, EY, JP Morgan Chase, Microsoft, and we all have very different models, if you will, for how we facilitate those alternative interview experiences. But really the goal is for a skill-based hiring effort. And so if your focus is on someone's skills, that is the ticket, you know, and then providing those other supports along the way once they're in the door is really how to build a successful program. So I would say that if you're working for a company that's interested in launching something like this, trying not to get bogged down by all of the different ways that there are to do this and rather figure out what works best for your organization. You know, same goes with trying to identify where to place people across the organization. I would try and identify what the need is first for your company, and then I can guarantee that you'll be able to go and find the talent. So another thing that we learned along the way was that executive sponsorship is really important. So having someone that is not necessarily in the C-suite, but if you're in a larger organization, if you have an advocate that has a higher level role in the organization, they can really be influential when it comes to socializing these opportunities and the benefits across the organization. Similarly, those community partners are absolutely crucial. I mean, they support us with anything from screening to sourcing to just supporting the candidates once they're in the door and through the interview process. So again, community partners are very, very important when it comes to launching a program like this. And we talked about this earlier, but leveraging feedback from the community. Every year our program changes, and that's because every year we're going back to the group and saying, hey, what went well? What can we improve? You know, we want to hear from you around how to best shape this out, because ultimately you're the one that's benefiting from it and you know best about what you need and what would help you be more successful in the workplace. And the same thing goes with accommodations. You know, we've been talking a lot about the accommodation word lately, and I'd love to just reiterate that accommodations don't necessarily need to be asks that go through HR, and rather just like success enablers or a change in the process. Things like following up with meeting notes after you have a meeting with someone, that doesn't just support a neurodivergent candidate, that supports any candidate. And so we really try to put a lot of emphasis on that when we provide manager training to all of our managers who participate in the program. And a lot of the feedback that we get is that, hey, this makes me a better people leader by having an understanding of these different ways to communicate and these different best practices that ultimately help the entire team, not just this one individual. Other ones, so yeah, that autism awareness training I think is really important in kind of demystifying some stereotypes for managers. And it also just provides them with a awareness and education that help them be more comfortable in that initial setting with someone. So it supports them with being more respectful of divergent communication styles or even nonverbal behaviors like stimming or a lack of eye contact. Once they have an awareness or an expectation that that may be something that they come across, they're way more likely to channel some of that unconscious bias and not be thrown off by behaviors like that or just different styles of communication. Lastly, I would say that another really important best practice is to collaborate and share these types of best practices or accommodations, success enablers with other industry leaders. And that's exactly what you all are doing here today, because if we really want to drive change at a macro level, we should all be working together to really make this a way of doing things for every organization and not just a specialized program. So I'll stop there and see if there are any questions, because I could go on all day.
Oh man, this was just so great. I love the success enablers. And that just goes right along with what Ashley and Catherine were talking about too. Like what helps you be successful? And so just ingraining that. And then once again, where are the recruiting needs? What are the skills? And then having this inclusive process can just help you get talent across the board. So I love that. We have our first question. So now everyone, we can start with our Q&A portion for both Danielle and Ashley and Catherine. So this first one is for Danielle. And it says, this is great that you have retention numbers to track. How much is that tracking, not only hiring, but also retention, a part of the best practices for this program? And what are items that are important to track?
Okay, that's a loaded question.
I know, it's also in the chat and I can repeat it too.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I didn't have the chat up. But so our retention rate, that is, that comprises all of the folks that we've brought through the program, both interns and full-time employees. So anyone that's come through, and that also accounts for our conversion rate. So any intern that's come through the program has also converted to a full-time employment opportunity, which is just fabulous. So that's one component, I think, was about retention. What was the next piece that was woven in there?
Yes. So then, and that's so congratulations on that. That's awesome.
Thank you.
I mean, 100%. And then the next piece is, what items are important to track?
Oh, definitely. I would say, so we check in with our employees and their managers on about, like, it depends on how long they've been with us. During the first year, we definitely are checking in a lot more often just to ensure that expectations are being met, that they feel like they are doing their best work and that their work is valued on the team. So we're checking in on just employee and manager satisfaction, whether they're happy in their role. And then with that, we start to identify other areas like whether or not they have the resources to look into career development. You know, if they want to start thinking about getting promoted, do they have the tools and access to understanding what that looks like and what pathway that might, you know, provide for them if they were to even go to another part of the organization, how they can do that. So, you know, some support with networking and those mentorships go a long way in ensuring that they have the support that they need to do so.
That's awesome. And I feel like that's so important for all employees, like you were saying too, just best practices overall, like this career and identity importance and mentorship, professional development, networks of support. That's just such great advice. Do we have any other questions? And feel free, I'm actually going to let the participants, if you want to unmute yourself and ask a question. Oh, yes, you're already allowed to do that. Or you can ask a question in the chat too. So feel welcome to, and I'm actually going to start our little poll too while we're doing this. And this is an anonymous poll. So while we're doing Q&A, we'll just have this poll up too. And we'll just have the floor open.
I might jump in with a thought that came in while Danielle was talking. I think it's so great to think about this becoming part of a company culture or an organization's culture. Especially, I know some of our students, if a program requires a diagnosis or anything like that, some of our students don't have that. Some of our students or prospective employees are self-identified. And it's hard to get diagnosed as an adult.
Yeah.
And we've met with a graduate student here now who was in the working world for 10 years and didn't get diagnosed until his 30s, but, you know, could have been benefiting from some of these accommodations and practices had they been a part of the company, rather than him needing to ask for them as an accommodation. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind.
Yeah. I love that, Catherine.
Yeah, definitely. And we don't require a diagnosis. So long as someone identifies as being neurodivergent, then, you know, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And that self-diagnosis, I think, not having that official, and if they identify as neurodivergent or just having, you know, challenges in certain areas, being okay with accepting that and just providing any support you can.
That's awesome. Any other questions from everyone? Or also feel free to share any best practices or lessons learned that you've experienced too. I know we have some employers here that have just started their programs, and you know, and others that have established programs. So definitely just would love to hear from you all as well. And we'll hang back. We'll just be here ready for questions. This was so informative. I think there's a lack of questions because you covered everything. It's been so great. There's a comment here from one of our Texas career engagement education specialist, Erin. She's our career counselor who helps students in this area. And she said, love the idea of sharing interview questions ahead of time, sharing a detailed schedule of how interviews will go. That is really great, just to outline the whole process. Oh, I also love the mention about not leading with, tell me about yourself right away. I also like to do that in interviews, talk about the culture and the company and the position, warm them up, make them feel comfortable with you, like they get experience of who you are, kind of get a glimpse, and then ask them about themselves. I think that's a great point. Catherine made that, I believe. Here's another one. At Danielle, thank you for sharing and answering my question. A lot of times companies may only track self-ID of disability to show the number of disabled employees, but not track retention and also career development and rate of promotion. Thank you for sharing that information.
Yeah, no,
oh, and the credit
you.
goes to Ashley. That's awesome. Great. Well, this has just been so informative. I'm so excited. I feel like everyone's going to come away with things they can actually put into action. I know our team is. I'm already going to take into account, you know, what helps you be successful instead of just asking about management style and explaining what that means more. So I know I'm walking away with some great advice from y'all, and just thank you so much. And everyone that's here today, we will definitely share the slides in our follow-up. You know, we thank you for your feedback. Let us know if there's any topics you'd like to see covered, if you'd like a one-on-one meeting about recruiting strategy. And once again, know that we can help you connect with campus-wide talent by skills. And if you have neurodiversity recruiting needs and target opportunities, I'll always tie in Ashley